All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the annual Board Fellowship Forum. For those of us here in Southeast Michigan, we got a lot of snow last night, so I hope you're all warm and safe wherever you are joining us from. My name is Haley Phillips, and I am the Student Program Manager for the Business Plus Impact Initiative at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. This is the social impact initiative here at the business school, whose aim is really to embed impact into every core activity at the school. So through the teaching that's done in the classrooms, the research that is done by our faculty members, and through co-curricular programs and activities such as this one that we are all here for today. The event that we are all here for this morning is part of the Board Fellowship Program here at the University of Michigan. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the program, it started in 1999, so it's been around for over 2 decades now, and we place graduate students from all of the schools and colleges across the university as non-voting board members on nonprofit boards here in Southeast Michigan. So these students serve as fellows throughout the duration of the academic year. They learn executive leadership skills while serving on the board, and they also work on a strategic project that has been identified by the board. So these projects can look like anything from updating bylaws and committee restructuring to creating financial dashboards for the board. So it's a really wonderful program, and I'd be happy to share more about this Board Fellowship program. If you're interested, I'll put my email in the chat. So to get started for today's event, I'm going to introduce our moderators for the panel, who are our senior fellows. They will begin with some preset questions, and then we will open it up to the audience at the end for questions. Our senior fellows are students who participated in the Board Fellowship program last year, and this year are serving as a leadership role with our staff to help design the program, serve as support and mentors for our current fellows, and they did a lot of the planning and heavy lifting for our event here this morning. So a huge thank you to these students. Our first moderator this morning is Hershey Pilla. She is a dual degree graduate student pursuing an MBA and a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning. Our second moderator is Connor Donnelly. He is also a dual degree graduate student pursuing an MBA and a Master's of Science from the School of Sustainability and the Environment. So with that, I will hand it over to our moderators. And thank you all so much for being here and joining us this morning.
Great, thank you so much, Haley. I hope everyone can hear me okay, but just want to say thank you again for taking the time on this Friday morning to join us. I think this is going to be a really interesting session, and we have some amazing speakers that I'll introduce in a second. But just want to reiterate, my name is Hershey. I am a second year out of 3 pursuing my dual degree here at Michigan. My background is in civil engineering, real estate, and community building, and I'm looking forward to kind of pursuing that once I leave here as well. My board fellowship appointment was with the Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center. So really excited to be seeing Kelly here on this panel today. I worked with her closely during my time as a board fellow. I will actually pass it over to Connor to quickly introduce himself as well, and then I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll get into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, Hirsch. I hope everyone can hear me well. So yeah, my name is Connor, he, him, his pronouns, a dual degree with the Business and Environment School. I worked with the Metro Detroit Salvation Army last year. Best experience, I think, I would say unequivocally for me as a grad student in my first year while navigating life as a student during the pandemic. My experience mostly resides in education. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda, and before that, I was an AmeriCorps member with the City of Los Angeles. And yeah, my long-term goal is to have my own social enterprise that addresses climate inequity. So love this space.
Awesome. So you've heard from us. I will give everyone a quick introduction of our panelists today, and then I would love for them to introduce themselves more fully. But first up, we have Courtney Smith. She is the founder and CEO of the Detroit Phoenix Center. Next, we have Kelly Maxwell. She's the board chair for the Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center and is the dean for undergraduate education for the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts at the University of Michigan. Next, we have Kyla Carlsen. She's the director of programs for Co.act Detroit. And finally, we have Kevin Thompson, who's the general manager for Good Worldwide and Upworthy, as well as a lecturer at Michigan Ross School of Business. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists here and request that each one of them just introduce themselves a little bit more fully, the nonprofit that you represent here today, and generally what sort of work is done at the organizations that you represent. So maybe we can start with Courtney and go down that the same order that I just went through.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I just have to apologize. My computer froze, so I'm joining from my phone. And my name is Courtney Smith, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Detroit Phoenix Center. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that contributes to the growing movement to prevent, to end, and to address youth homelessness and break the generational cycle of poverty. So we do this by responding to the needs of young people in our community who may be experiencing housing insecurity or who have been identified as high risk of experiencing homelessness. We provide emergency housing support, educational and life skills programming, youth leadership opportunities, and workforce development training. But the mainstay of our organization is our drop-in center that houses those programs. So a young person can drop in off the street and take a shower, wash their clothes, get a hot meal. They can take a shower, access our food pantry, recreational activities, case management services, and a host of other programs that empower the young people that we serve to have autonomy over their care and begin to achieve their own definition of self-sufficiency.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for that introduction. I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Kelly Maxwell, and I use she and her pronouns. As Hershey said, I'm Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Education at the University of Michigan, so that is my day job. And I'm also the board chair of the Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center. So we are a national, from the title, you can get that, as a virtual center that works with the higher education sector. So we work with colleges and universities and their partners to really help advance innovative dialogic practices to address the multiple and persistent challenges to justice and equity. So helping build dialogue skills with students who are having difficult conversations on their campuses. Similarly, for faculty to build dialogic teaching and learning skills to utilize in their classrooms. And then just broadly across various campuses to help them think about how to tackle these persistent issues in higher education that create difficult conversations on our campuses. And we do that through webinar programming, mostly through communities of practice that we host monthly. And almost everything we do is via Zoom. So in fact, the pandemic actually worked in this organization's favor by allowing many more people to be comfortable with the technology of Zoom and other kind of web style programming. And then we offer a newsletter that provides skills and resources for developing dialogic practices on campus. We are a working board, which means we do not have an executive director or any paid staff beyond a program assistant that helps us keep on track for very limited hours. And so we are doing the work of the board and moving toward a 3 to 5 year plan of sustainability to then hire an executive director. And I want to give a shout out to Hershey, who you already heard worked with us last year, Nicole, and then our current fellows, Anna and Stella, who've been doing a tremendous job on some really important projects to help us move forward as an organization. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I will pass it over to Kyla.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'm Kyla. I am the Director of Programs with Co.act Detroit. I use she, her pronouns. If you're not familiar with Co.act, we are a resource hub for nonprofits across Southeast Michigan. So we do have a physical location that was really a centralized place for nonprofits to come and connect and get connected to resources, the 6,500 square foot space located in New Center, Detroit. However, we've been operating fully virtual since the pandemic, and so we've had to pivot and shift a lot of our programming to the virtual space and find new and innovative ways for people to connect and convene that way. So a lot of what you're saying, Kelly, definitely resonates with some of the shifts we've had to make programmatically. So Co.act provides, we have 3 sort of programmatic pillars. We provide capacity building programming and resources. So what we like to say, access to best and next practices from local, what's working really well locally to lifting up some national best practices. Our second pillar is equitable grant making. So we have administered several grant funds, and then we also do work with philanthropy and nonprofits in our community to talk about equitable grant making practices and trying to close the racial funding gap. And then our third programmatic pillar is network building. So a big part of why Co.act was formed a few years ago is that we know there's a lot of really, really great work nonprofits and others are doing around our region, but it's often happening in silos and disparate and disconnected. And so we really serve, a big part of our mission is to connect those dots and help organizations work better together.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kyla. And we'll close out our panelists with Kevin.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Thompson. Unlike the other panelists, I feel like maybe a little bit of an imposter. I don't have an operational role in a nonprofit. I'm the general manager of Good Worldwide. We're a social impact company helping people and organizations be a force for good. We formed a nonprofit, so I can sort of speak to for-profits forming nonprofits. A place called the Good Institute, and the Good Institute is meant to be a hub similar to Co.act Detroit for mission-aligned organizations focused on business, media, and science. The Good Institute is the container into which we completed a merger with Net Impact. Net Impact is a major global student organization of around 160,000 business school plus business-oriented students focused on being a force for good somehow in their career. And that can be in the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, government. So we now have a direct relationship with Net Impact, with whom I've been a member for about 20 years. I can also speak from the perspective of having been a board member for many years. I spent 6 years as a board member with the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, which is an interesting structural approach to nonprofit collaboration and organization. I'm currently a executive board member of the Ann Arbor Tree Line. If any of you have been on the High Line in Manhattan, we're actually trying to build something similar in Ann Arbor to go from the Argo Cascades north of the town all the way to the stadium in the south. I'm on the advisory board of the Aspen Institute's Business and Society program. I've been a trustee at an independent school. And I have one other responsibility that's technically a nonprofit, and that's being a father. And both of my 5 and 10-year-old boys are home from school today because of the snow. So my apologies if I get disrupted by all kinds of noise that's happening in my house as they get a little too excited about going sledding once I finish with this. So I'll try to keep myself on mute when I'm not talking so it's not too disruptive. Oh, and I also am an adjunct faculty at the Raw School, teaching undergraduate class on self-leadership. And then every other year I teach social entrepreneurship to MBAs. And I was like Connor, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana and West Africa many, many moons ago.
Thank you so much. Wow, we are really joined by some spectacular panelists today, and I can't wait to get into the meat of our conversation here. Just to kind of ground us on the purpose of today's call and sort of the sorts of conversations we're hoping to have, the theme of this year's forum is Stronger Together, How Nonprofits Can Collaborate. The reason we chose this theme is, you know, the last few years, especially with the pandemic, the recent elections, you know, our country is becoming seemingly more and more fragmented in some ways. And we feel like it's an opportunity as we come into the future of the United States or society in general, for us to collaborate and make sure that we're sharing best practices and kind of pushing society forward in a big sense. And so that's sort of, you know, the reason that we put this panel together and chose these panelists here today. So I really want to kick us off with the series of questions that we have prepared for nonprofit collaboration to our panelists, asking, you know, how have you partnered with other nonprofits in the past in order to strengthen your current services? And I'll actually go backwards in terms of panelists just to keep this kind of interesting. So Kevin, if you want to sort of kick us off with that, that would be great.
Sure, I'll give two examples and then pass off to the other panelists. One, I would say, with this idea of nonprofits being aligned with for-profits and a recognition that really the lines between sectors are getting increasingly blurry. A lot of problems to be effectively solved require collaboration between private, public, and nonprofit sectors. And so really designing structures that enable organizations to plug in depending on what their funding and procurement needs are, what their mission needs are, what their staffing needs are, is, we feel, at Goodwill, what a really important advancement in the sector. And so I, you know, I'm sure we'll get some more time over the course of this conversation to speak to when different types of organizations can come together, not just nonprofit to nonprofit, the ability to bring resources, capabilities, people, and problem-solving expertise is really, really powerful. A second, more specific example I'll share is when I was with the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, they did something, we did something that I felt like was really innovative. It was something called coordinated funding. It was a recognition that so many organizations are out there trying to get grant dollars almost continuously. And they're having to pitch so many different times. And so streamlining that process and bringing together the three biggest funders in Washtenaw County at the time, which were United Way, the city, and the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, enabled organizations to present their needs to a single review process and to be able to access larger pools of money. So again, this recognition that the ecosystem of nonprofits can be so incredibly fragmented, and that can be so difficult for social entrepreneurs trying to hustle and stitch things together. Anything that organizations can do that are on the funder side to simplify that process, you know, I think helps the people out there doing the work have more time and energy to focus on the work and not having to hustle hard all the time, bringing dollars in the door. So I think this notion of coordinated funding against different organizations that are primarily operating as funders or pass-throughs of larger philanthropic grants was something I particularly enjoyed participating in, and I think it's been replicated in some other instances as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Kyla, could you kind of speak to how, you know, your nonprofit has collaborated with others in the past?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, everything that Co.act does is really in partnership. I often differentiate our organization from our partner organizations by saying that my team isn't providing direct technical assistance. What we're really doing is connecting organizations we serve to other resources and to our partners. and engaging those local and national experts to design programs that fill the gaps in what's already out there. So through the direct programs that we offer, such as our Collab Connect program, which offers free 45-minute one-on-one consultations for nonprofit leaders, those appointments are actually hosted by partner organizations, Michigan Nonprofit Association, Data Driven Detroit, and then some for-profit organizations as well, like Apparatus Solutions. Through our grant making efforts, we always convene and assemble an advisory committee. So everything from program design to the selection process with the selection committee is informed by multiple organizations, nonprofit, and other partners from across sectors, as Kevin mentioned. So from academia, philanthropy, and even our newest grant program that we're partnering on, engaging more residents and those directly being served by the programs in that selection and decision-making process. And then we also do formal collaborative programming, which is especially accelerated during the pandemic. So we've partnered with, right now we're partnering with Michigan Community Resources to launch a public resource navigation tool that will be like a Yelp for nonprofits to get connected to consulting resources. And we've launched a number of other programs like Reimagining the Nonprofit Workplace Toolkit during COVID, co-hosting an annual Detroit Capacity Building Forum conference, dialogue series, and a number of other initiatives that we've done in partnership.
Amazing. Thank you. It seems like, yeah, your business model is exactly like built on collaboration, and it's kind of integral to the work that you do at Co.act. I will, push it over to Kelly to kind of speak to the work at DDNRC.
Yes, thank you. And I'm learning so much from my fellow panelists. So thank you for all the wisdom that you're providing and information. So we partner with mostly our member institutions, which are other nonprofits, right? They're colleges and universities. So we do that primarily through partnering with specific institutions for our conferences. Up until the pandemic, we were offering a national conference every other year to bring people together. So we're an organization that's only 10 years old. So we've hosted in partnership with UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin, partners at the University of Maryland, and then at the University of Michigan, we've also hosted a conference. So we kind of had to put that on hold during the pandemic. And the way that we've partnered instead during this time is through some of our member institutions have co-sponsored some of our webinars. So WashU and St. Louis has co-sponsored some of our webinars along with Princeton University. So that is our primary way that we have partnered. We really draw on the expertise of our membership and especially our board. Board members are all recognized as experts and leaders in intergroup dialogue nationally. And so their institutions tend to be willing to allow them to participate in various consultations, webinars, conferences, etc. And in that way, we've partnered with our higher ed institutions. I'll stop there and probably in another question, describe another collaboration that we have. I'll wait on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I feel like, when you think about nonprofits, you kind of forget that educational institutions are that as well, and that's exactly like central to the work that DDNRC does. I'm excited to have you on this panel to kind of share that other perspective. We'll kind of close off this question with Courtney, if you could kind of speak to the work that you do with the Detroit Phoenix Center and the collaborations that you have with other nonprofits there.
Yes, absolutely. So just like many of the other panelists said, partnerships are very, very essential to the fabric and the essence of the work that we do. As a newer nonprofit organization, since 2016, we have had well over hundreds of partnerships with various local and national organizations to strengthen our services, just because we started out as an entirely volunteer driven organization. We've grown since then, but the scope of work we do relies heavily on partnerships. And some of those national partners that we have partnership includes like National Innovation Society, Google, Forbes Under 30. Some of the local partnerships we've established is Forgotten Harvest, Gleaners. And then, for example, like our after school program is geared towards students that are McKinney-Vento eligible. And we wanted to ensure that our students had access to reliable tutors who understood the unique needs. So we partnered with Break the Cycle, a student organization here at the University of Michigan, focused on providing tutoring services to students who are experiencing housing and basic need insecurity. So they provide one-on-one tutoring to our students weekly. Alternatively, when COVID-19 hit, we were forced to close our drop-in center abruptly for a short stint. And we had a pantry that was filled with essential items and needed to get them out to those we serve quickly and safely. So we partner with local nonprofits such as Enjoy Detroit, who had the influence and the transportation mechanism to help us to distribute all of the items to those that we service. And they delivered to our members bi-weekly. And we partnered also with them on large scale distribution. And as a result of that partnership, collectively in 2020, we was able to serve over 12,000 individuals in the wake of the pandemic, and half of those were children and youth. And we distributed over 7,000 care packages filled with essential goods. So those are just some of the ways that we lean into partnerships.
Thank you so much, Courtney. So I'm gonna keep our panelists on our toes. I'm gonna send our next question over to Kevin. Kevin, y'all have largely answered this, but to be fully comprehensive, have you made any adjustments to your operating model based on the work of other nonprofits? And if so, do you have any general suggestions for nonprofit collaboration?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest force there, Connor, is and probably the most dramatic, is trying to execute mergers. That there's a lot of operational inefficiency when so many things are duplicated. I don't mean to sound kind of business jargony here, but I think, and I've always felt, there's a lot of opportunity, especially with nonprofits who have requirements for a pretty heavy governance structure because of IRS regulations and otherwise, that an ability to partner in with other organizations with shared missions while also holding on to the right level of autonomy can, again, enable people with incredible energy to solve particular issues and problems at a community level, local, national, international, and really focus on the work and not have to get so consumed by day-to-day governance responsibilities. There can be some cost savings with shared services on the back end. We've already seen that with the Good Institute. We've got 3 program organizations who are part of us today. And so I really hope that, and I know it's very difficult to execute, and we can talk more about that if people have questions. It is really difficult to execute a merger in the nonprofit space. However, the benefits do feel like they accrue a bit more easily and faster than mergers and acquisitions in the for-profit space. So I hope to see more of that in the sector in the future.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be follow-up questions there. Kelly, can you answer the same question, please?
Yeah, I'm really glad Kevin mentioned that, because something that we have really wrestled with in the DDNRC is partnering and really collaborating in becoming an organization within another nonprofit. And we haven't made that leap yet because I think we're concerned about losing our autonomy by partnering with a more established, well-known nonprofit in the higher education sector. So, it's something that we are thinking about. There's concerns from our board members, so we haven't taken that leap. But it is something I think we need to make some decisions about in the next couple of years about whether or not that would be the way to take us to the next level, but without losing who we are as an organization. So thank you, Kevin, for raising that, because it is something that's on our mind. I think the way that we have really learned from other nonprofits is really seeking out advice and expertise from other nonprofit leaders. So I've anybody that will talk to me who's been a board chair, I've really tried to seek out their expertise, especially those that have made the leap from a working board to having an executive director, and tried to learn from their success. And that goes across all sectors. Recently, last fall, I spoke with someone who was in an arts organization who had been chairing their board at a time when they made that shift. And so I learned a lot in that way. And so those are, I guess, right now, that's the primary way that we are really trying to take advantage of looking at operational models that are similar to ours, and then using that to build on what we can learn from those organizations.
Thank you so much. What resonated with me in particular, when I was an AmeriCorps member, the phrase that the mantra that was said ad nauseum, it takes a village. Why not use all the resources around you? So thank you. Kyla, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
Sure. And actually, before I answer for Co.act, it's top of mind, I want to lift up 3 resources that are sort of relevant to what Kevin and Kelly said. So for organizations that might be thinking about merging, or, to your point, Kelly, around just even thinking through what's best for the next stage of our organization, through our Collab Connect program and our partnership with Michigan Nonprofit Association, we offer what's called a principles and practices assessment. That's kind of, I like to compare it as a SWOT for your nonprofit, which I think this audience would definitely perhaps resonate with. And so that can be a really great tool, especially as you're thinking about the next stages, and the M&A partners who host those appointments will review the results with you and kind of help think through next steps, and can connect to other resources based on the results. And then more specifically with mergers and acquisitions, that nonprofit toolkit I mentioned that we co-produced through the pandemic with other organizations has a specific section. So there's a webinar replay and other resources within the toolkit specific to mergers and acquisitions, and some stories of organizations that have navigated this in the past. And then the third resource, Michigan Community Resources, offers pro bono legal assistance statewide. They're a core partner of ours, and so they've helped organizations navigate some of these formal mergers, and can connect to a lot of the tactical services that are needed to execute a transaction like that. So I wanted to just share those with my fellow panelists as well. And so for Co.act, I think that, our operating model is unique in that we haven't had to pivot. One, we're a fairly young organization. We just are about 2.5 years old now. However, we were several years in the making prior to that. And we did a lot of engagement and focus groups and co-creation on the front end, everything from the layout of our physical space to the programs that we offer today. And we're designed to be very collaborative in nature, as you pointed out, Hershey. So we're really intentional about the programs that we deliver, and either partnering with other organizations to co-produce programs or co-design things, or lifting up what's working well and making referrals. So any programming we're doing really is filling the gaps. So that's a bit about our operating model, and how we make sure collaboration and co-creation is at the center of it.
Thank you so much. Our last panelist for this question, Courtney.
Yeah, so I would definitely, just to piggyback off of what Kyla said about leading into some of the some of the resources that are offered, I would absolutely have to say that Detroit Phoenix Center, we've benefited directly from resource support from the Michigan Nonprofit Association as we were developing our programming and making that transition from a working board to a governance board. We actually leaned into some of that legal support that was provided. And then also we lean into Nonprofit Enterprise at Work, which is, I believe is based in Ann Arbor, is another organization that has really helped us to strengthen our service model and look at best practices around the country. And then even when I was starting the organization, I took a train journey across the country and I interviewed young people and executive directors of various organizations that do similar work that we do. Our model hasn't changed as a result, but it really informed some of the work that we do because it was created in community for and with those we serve. Other examples where, collaboration has really amplified our work is we partner with Challenge Detroit, which is a fellowship program for community-minded individuals, and they focus on nonprofit partnerships. So we were a challenge partner, and we identified some of the capacity gaps within our organization, and they made recommendations for sustainability. And so as a result of that collaboration, we were able to come out with an app that we're launching for our organization, and then also a podcast, but that came just out of that collaboration. And so I can stop there, but I would say through all of the partnerships and collaborations that we've seen that has helped to improve our operating model, I would say something that has been very consistent with all of them is, one, we spent a lot of hours working collaboratively to co-create and design the services. And number two, there was a shared value of centering the voices and experiences of the community. And number three, there was a written agreement that we had that kind of leaned into shared power from all organizations involved that laid out expectations and responsibilities.
Thank you so much. We're gonna move on to our next question. And Kyla, it's a long one, so I'm gonna read it twice, but I'm gonna ask if you can answer first, all right? So our next question, understanding there are over 22,000 nonprofits in the Metro Detroit area, how should nonprofits prioritize their collaborative efforts? For example, should a given nonprofit look for nonprofit partnerships that are similar in size, in mission, proximity, a combination, something else? Alternatively, is this something that cannot be generalized and is just incredibly context specific? So I'll read it one more time for at a minimum our audience members. Understanding that there are 22,000 nonprofits in the Metro Detroit area, how should nonprofits prioritize their collaborative efforts?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's the latter. And when we think about the spectrum of collaboration, there's everything from what we've sort of started talking about with formal mergers and to more informal collaborations like the Phoenix Center referring some of the clients they serve to, gleaners for food distribution. So collaboration can take many shapes and sizes. Co.act also really believes that nonprofit leaders and staff know what's best for their organizations. Collaboration also takes a lot of time and energy. And so different organizations are in different positions to be able to collaborate at different times. The other core part of our theory of change is that, there, as you mentioned, there's over 22,000 nonprofits in our area alone. Often every year we see the number of nonprofits registered increase, but we don't often see, the number of the poverty rate really decreasing. So we believe that the issues facing our communities are so big and so systemic that they're too much for any one organization to tackle alone. And kind of, as Kevin pointed out earlier, we have to collaborate and work together across sectors to really achieve the lasting and equitable change that all of our organizations are collectively working towards. Co.act has supported collaborations in two ways. Through our Activate Fund program, we provided direct grants to collaboratives around the region, and as well as in-kind services. So access to facilitators, graphic design, photography, videography services. Some of that was designed when folks were meeting in person, but we provided services to collaborative groups and are now piloting a peer learning cohort for collaborative leaders. And I think if there's just one thing that we've learned, it's that this looks different for each community. It looks different for each organization and for each group that is working together. There is no one size fits all. So it really is custom and unique to each organization and each community's needs.
Thank you so much. Courtney, can you speak to the previous question?
Yes, absolutely. So I would definitely have to echo that again, there is no one size fits all approach, but I would definitely say if I was to identify some of the best practices that we've seen is one, ensuring that mission and vision alignment, right? And that there is a shared value add from the parties that's involved. Another element that I've seen is having like skin in the game, right? So like understanding responsibilities and everyone is bringing something of shared value to the table. And it is always like case by case. So like we are newer organization and we've had grassroots partnerships and we've had partnerships with national organizations, but it was always mutually beneficial. And then there was mission and vision alignment. One collaborative effort that really resonates with me in this season is a group that I'm a part of. It's called the Black Executive Directors Alliance of Detroit. And we're all youth development focused organizations. We're all Black founders, and we all got together because we saw a disparity that existed within the nonprofit sector, particularly for Black-led organizations. So we formed an alliance to pool resources and to provide training and support to other Black executive directors and founders of nonprofit organizations, and to be able to advocate for the needs of those nonprofit organizations to be and leaders to be able to contribute, to a more equitable and just, ecosystem.
Courtney, thank you so much. It's so important that, we see ourselves in our leadership. Kevin, can you speak to this question?
Yeah, I think the other panelists are in a better position to me to speak to this because they're out there on the front lines doing the work that they're doing. I would just say that just to really anchor because collaborations, I think there can be a lot of motivations that feel structural or operational, but at the end of the day, if it's not helping serve the mission, whether it's youth or it's climate action or it's classroom equity or whatever the issue may be, if it really isn't going to help the people being served, it just feels like an exercise in inside baseball that's going to just detract from the mission. So whenever I'm working with nonprofit organizations, it's always making sure that the mission comes first. That's sort of the benefit of being a nonprofit. You don't have to worry about shareholders. You don't have to worry about being profitable. You do have to worry about mission execution and delivering on mission. And so just making sure to stay anchored and focused that whatever is being done, I think Courtney's example is a great one, about coming together with other leaders. Those sorts of formal and informal relationships, I think, can be so useful. Also at the board level, that can be very useful. But at the end of the day, if it's not supporting the mission of the respective organizations, it's time wasted, it's energy wasted.
Yeah, I would pick up on that mission very specifically. We clarified our mission as a board over the past year. And I think that helps us answer the question of, is this collaboration right for us? And how do we help our member organizations, which again, to reiterate, are other nonprofits. So as Kyla and Courtney mentioned, there is no one size fits all for our members. our member organizations. We work with community colleges, small liberal arts colleges, large research universities, et cetera, and from all over the country. So the difficult dialogues that they're having on their campuses are very different. Some are related to border issues. Some are related to campus inequality. Some are related to gender and STEM issues, and et cetera, et cetera. It goes on. And so there is no singular point of difficult dialogue that we can just say, well, everybody's having this conversation. But our mission is to help build dialogic skills around justice and equity issues. So if we keep that central, then the collaborations that we are engaged in and the work that we do, stays really connected with that mission in all of our partnerships.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kelly. That actually really seamlessly segues into our next question, which is, what are the biggest hurdles surrounding the formation of a positive and synergistic nonprofit to nonprofit relationship? I know that you, Kelly, and Kevin talked about how, alignment on mission and values is critical in order to achieving that synergy. Can you both kind of speak to, potentially other hurdles that you see that kind of prevents these synergistic relationships from occurring?
I can go first. I'll speak about maybe the marriage level synergistic, which is a merger. And it's really complicated. I didn't know going into the merger we ran with Net Impact that it would be as complicated as it was. I think that when you have board members and executive leadership teams uncertain about what their future role is going to be, and when you don't have financial currency being exchanged, you sometimes have emotional currency being exchanged. It makes it really, really complicated. And the legal structures at the national and state level are also really complicated. So the ability to pull off mergers requires a really significant commitment. Otherwise, it's going to be a major distraction, because that's not something that I can't imagine it happening in anything less than 6 months. Maybe with two really motivated organizations that are both of similar size and scope, maybe that even share a couple of board members. Maybe something like that could happen quickly. But if you can unlock that potential, then I think that there's a lot that can be done to support mission, which is, at the end of the day, as I've said, is the ultimate goal. But the execution it's complicated in that people join boards for different reasons. People join nonprofits for different reasons. And neither of those is the reason likely financial. And so all of a sudden you're dealing with a lot of different types of human dynamics. And I've just found that to be both fascinating as well as really, really complicated. But I think the payoff is worth it. It's not a casual exercise. It's got a lot more intensity to it than that.
And I mentioned earlier that we had another collaboration that I would tell you about, and it's with a national organization that's sort of an umbrella or meta organization, I guess I would call it, that is made up of others of us that are doing dialogue type of work. Now, this organization focuses more on community and democratic dialogue and deliberation, and then highlights the partner and member organizations from time to time and programming that we're doing. And it's been really great to connect with another group that is trying to get people in our polarized society to talk together. At the same time, I think one of the hurdles has been these different missions, right? So it sounds really compatible when you think about it on the surface. The Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center has been very intentional about creating an extraordinarily diverse board in terms not only of kind of educational institutions and geography, but identity and perspectives, but particularly around social identities. And that has not been a priority for this other organization that we're part of. And so, that type of collaboration has, it has felt a little bit disingenuous for us to go all in with this other group because we're not aligned in our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I mean, our mission is very clearly about equity and justice. Many of these other organizations are about democratic engagement, and we also are trying to get people to participate in our democracy, but the angle is different. And so I think that has been a conundrum for us as an organization, and certainly a challenge to the collaboration over time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly and Kevin there. I just want to invite our speakers, Kyla and Courtney, to add to this question if you have any, personal experiences related to hurdles that you've encountered when trying to, come across or form a positive nonprofit relationship.
Sure, I can jump in. I think shifting from a competitive to a collaborative mindset requires trust building. And so I think that can often be a big hurdle, and really primarily because many nonprofit leaders and organizations are really deeply embedded in doing the work and very busy and serving the communities that they're serving. And trust building takes time and energy. And so I think much like mission alignment, you have to figure out if that's there. You also have to be able to trust your partners for a successful collaboration. And so I think that's a hurdle as well. And then perhaps sort of to just name the elephant in the room, I think another hurdle is the scarcity mindset that is often prevalent in our sector, and something that Co.act is part of our mission is to sort of disrupt that status quo. But that is a factor for many organizations that may be competing for funding, and that might be standing in the way from being open to collaborating with each other, which is unfortunate and something that we hope we can start to shift and change.
Thank you. And then I'll jump in and talk about sometimes culture could be a hurdle. As a BIPOC-led organization, we are focused on shifting away and examining ways how white dominant culture shows up in the work that we do, and is it harmful for our services and how we render the services to the community and how we partner with our community. So I would certainly say culture, because there is a lot of red tape and politics and silo culture that exists within the nonprofit sector. And we are really focusing on shying away from that and re-envisioning how we can show up in the space as a millennial-led, BIPOC-led organization that's bringing fresh and new energy to the space. So I would certainly say that looking at culture and acknowledging elephants, right, and acknowledging disparities, all of those things, if not brought to the forefront, and a lot of that certainly leans into the power, to the trust building and the power sharing that has been elevated. But if those things aren't brought to the forefront at the beginning of a partnership, then it could not be aligned.
Yeah, thank you so much to our panelists for kind of diving into that question. I know it's important for for-profit businesses just as much as it's important for nonprofits. So it's been really interesting to hear your thoughts. we'll actually switch over to some of the great questions we've been getting in the chat right now. So, I'll invite Young Chan, if you would like to unmute and ask your question, please do so now. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it as well.
Hi, Hershey and Connor and every wonderful panelist. I'm Young Chan, and I am very happy to be here. I am a first-year Master of Public Policy student. I am a current board fellow, and Haley has been a wonderful resource. So I believe in positionality statements when we ask questions. So I am an immigrant, poor background, queer, and my goal is to found or join a nonprofit that provides higher education funding to immigrants who do not have access to traditional scholarships, federal aid, grants, or no co-signers for loans. And that's a personal pain point for me and my family and my community. So with that said, I've been very interested in the nonprofit space. What has been, as somebody who does not come from a nonprofit background, what's been a little jarring for me as an outsider to witness and to hear about is when so many nonprofits serve sometimes the same area, same demographic, overlapping missions, asking for the grants from the same sources, and sometimes taking a very paternalistic view towards service, meaning rather than thinking about what communities have and what they can provide, how we can ultimately empower the community so that they don't need external service-oriented organizations. And I also very much value equity, inclusion, justice. So I wanted to hear from our experts today on, what does that look like really when it's done right, and not kind of high level overview language, because for me, it's very easy to say, oh, let's be inclusive, let's be equitable, let's include certain laws in the bylaws or governance documents, but day to day, practically, what does that actually look like? Is that staff representation? Is that community meetings? Is it town halls? Is it making sure that grant writing includes certain frameworks and models with community feedback? Like I would love to hear that expertise, please. Thank you so much, by the way. Thank you. I very much feel privileged to be in this space.
I'd be happy to talk a little bit about this. I can't speak so much to going after different grants, but what I can speak to is how the organization works. So we are all on Zoom together because our board members are spread out across the country, different time zones as well. So that has been something that we are trying not to privilege only Eastern Standard Time because oftentimes Eastern Time is like the time frame that everybody else has to work around. So that's one way, but really interrogating power. And so we in the board meetings and in committee meetings, we're looking at who is facilitating any given committee, and representationally, is that a diverse group across across all of our committees. Being very intentional to talk about power and to talk about privilege in those spaces. We do have a board chair, a vice chair, and various other members. And so in some sense, there is a hierarchical organization. And we try to be explicit about kind of working through that and negotiating how we work together. I consider myself as a collaborative partner with all the other board members. And even though I'm chairing things, I am also trying to be a listener and be responsive and try to use dialogic techniques that our organization also espouses. So I think that's an important piece too. So that's a little bit, it's the intentionality and being very purposeful in thinking those issues through as the organization moves forward. And sometimes that means that process takes a longer time. So I suspect we're less efficient in terms of getting to the next thing. But I think we're all okay with that because we think that the process is as important as the outcome.
Thank you so much for answering that question. This is Courtney. I'm gonna lean in. Young Chan, thank you for asking that question. I'm gonna lean into the position statement. So I'm a Black woman. I'm a college graduate. I am a former foster and homeless youth. In my youth, I have lived experience with the work that we do at the Detroit Phoenix Center. But I also serve on many boards, and I have a position of power in my community. And I have to acknowledge that power. And even though I have lived experience through the work that I do with the Detroit Phoenix Center, 15 years removed, right? I still have to make sure that the voices of those that we served are centered in the work. And so that looks like practically, number one, we have a youth board that shares the power in the decision-making. When the Detroit Phoenix Center opened, they looked at our policy manual, helped to develop all the policies. They painted and designed the actual physical location of the center. They are really focused on systems change work. They're trained in nonprofit management, fundraising, grant writing, public speaking. We measure success by not needing to exist. And so because we still exist, we believe that it's important to empower the youth that we service and build power alongside of them to drive change. So we hire the young people through programs such as AmeriCorps Vista or Public Allies to serve within the organization, because we believe that those closest to the problems need to be the ones coming up and driving the solutions. We have town halls, we have focus groups, stakeholder convenings, they sit on panels, all of that. And even through every program, we ensure that young people's leadership are valued and that we're providing programs and services that are informed, that are driven, and that are designed by the young people that we serve. And at the board of directors level, we work very intentionally to ensure that our board is diverse, that we're just now kind of beginning to have those very hard conversations around inequity in the nonprofit sector and how the board of directors can lean in, because historically, even in the especially in the human service space, it's been very, very, very white dominated, where those that are being served do not look like those who have been leading the organizations. And so those are some very practical examples that I could provide from our standpoint.
Yeah, thank you for that, Courtney. And I'll jump in because I think we have a really similar approach in one, honoring the lived expertise. And so what that looks like from Co.act standpoint is designing our programs around the nonprofits that we serve. So I mentioned a lot of engagement that was done early on in our formation as an organization. All of our programs are directly responding to what we're hearing are the top needs of the nonprofit organizations in our region. And that was done through focus groups, through one-on-one engagements, through continuously listening and trying to be responsive, and ensuring that the way that we're doing programming through the facilitators and other organizations that we're partnering with share those values, as we talked about mission alignment, that we're providing capacity building in such a way that is providing thought partnership and helping nonprofit leaders tap into their own expertise when, as I said earlier, we believe that nonprofit leaders know what's best for their organization. I also would lift up some of the equitable grant making tactics that I mentioned. This is a core pillar of our work earlier. And so as an intermediary grant maker, one of the ways that we embed equitable practices are favoring or looking for organizations like Courtney's that uplift lived expertise in the way that they're doing their work. And so an example of this right now, we're in the middle of the current round of selection for the Kresge Innovative Detroit Kresge Innovative Projects Detroit Plus, KIPD Plus program. And we were brought on as a partner. Kresge has administered this program for years. I think they've distributed 11 or 12 million since 2014. They brought us in as a partner because of our grant making approach. And one of the things we're piloting this year is engaging a resident decision making committee. So what was historically awarded and decided on by a foundation and a foundation board with perhaps some input from nonprofits, we're now establishing a selection committee and a selection process that will have at least 50% of applicant reviews done by residents in the area that program is serving. We're doing things like that are piloting and modeling different ways to be more equitable with how grants are made. And then likewise, we're also convening conversations because we don't have all the answers. So one of our collaborations is a partnership with Grand Valley State University's Johnson Center for Philanthropy. We're convening philanthropic leaders from around the region and BIPOC-led nonprofit leaders. A sampling, certainly not all, to talk about power dynamics between philanthropy and nonprofits, and with a particular emphasis on shifting more resources to BIPOC-led nonprofits. And so those are some of the ways that I think tactically we're trying to practice equity.
Amazing. Kyla, can you, before we ask our next question, or from the group, can you just clarify what BIPOC is for our audience members?
Oh, sure. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
No, that's the acronym. Perfect. So there was a question asked earlier by Jack Foreman. Jack, are you comfortable asking the question? If not, I'm more than happy to read it. I'm going to take that as I'll read that. So the question reads, are you seeing nonprofits make more efforts to generate program revenue, either by partnering with social enterprises or replicating their models?
Can you repeat the question again?
Of course, and I'll make sure to drop it back in the chat again. And I'll read a little bit more slowly. I'm sorry if I'm excited. Are you seeing nonprofits make more efforts to generate program revenue, either by partnering with social enterprises or replicating their models?
I'd put a comment up in the chat, so I'll just emphasize it a little bit and put a little bit more context around it. Obviously, there are some organizations, depending on their mission, for which like earned revenue would be a total distraction and a waste of time. But for many, there's a rethink happening across the sector around how can you get a portion of your budget from earned revenue to offset the risks that come from overdependency on philanthropic sources or government grants, as well as an ability to sort of start figuring out what is the value of what's being provided in some, even tangential way. And I've seen a number of funders, when you look at a lot of the philanthropic funders around social entrepreneurs. So like behind the Ashoka Fellowship Program, behind the Elevate Prize Foundation program, there's an emphasis on helping social entrepreneurs and nonprofits devise some mechanism for earned revenue as a part of their overall operating budget. And so I think that more and more there does appear to be a movement. That could be the ARC, a music venue in Ann Arbor, charging ticket prices by being a nonprofit, or it can be Net Impact having an event where they invite people in and have corporate sponsors, or it can be a local organization providing a service that figures out some way to monetize a portion of what they're doing. So there's a lot of different ways to establish that. But I have certainly observed a number of different, especially pools of philanthropic dollars that are singularly focused on helping nonprofits develop earned revenue. So it's not just the earned revenue that generates income for the nonprofit, it's that also opens doors to other philanthropic funders. I'll hand it over, Connor, to another panelist if they'd like to jump in on the point about revenue.
Yeah, it'd be great.
I can jump in. So I would echo your sentiment, Kevin. I do think we're seeing organizations thinking about establishing an earned revenue stream, or how to strengthen and grow, or even formalize an existing earned revenue product or service. So in 2019, this was before COVID, because we hosted the workshop in our space. We hosted an earned revenue workshop, and it was a full day program. It was oversubscribed. We had people sort of showing up that day trying to get into the program. And then likewise throughout the day and afterwards, we had really, really great feedback from the attendees. And so I think that was sort of our initial gauge of interest in this kind of topic. And from there, we designed a pilot program. I actually see some folks here who participated in our Earned Revenue Accelerator. And so that kind of took that curriculum to the next level of really working hands-on in a cohort model for 6 weeks to help organizations that already had some sales history be able to take that earned revenue stream to the next level. So I think it has been a part of our programming, and we've seen a lot of interest in that topic.
Awesome. Kelly, Courtney, would either of you like to speak to this? Or if not, happy to move on to the next question.
Just quickly, the way that our organization is doing that is through building a consultation model. And in fact, that's one of the strategic projects of our BNI Fellows this year, is to work with one of our committees to build that out. We've started doing consultations sort of ad hoc, and now we're, because we're being asked by colleges and universities to come and, share with us about how to create sustained dialogue programs or that sort of thing on campuses. And so now we're taking a step back to say, okay, well, what does this really look like in practice, and how can we use this as a revenue generator for our organization?
And the way that we are leaning in to earn revenue at the Detroit Phoenix Center, similarly to what I believe our other panelists just mentioned, that we too are leaning into a consultation model. We're exploring what that looks like, Kelly, so as well at the Detroit Phoenix Center. And then also more recently, like just this month, we partnered with a local social enterprise, Ken Walker Co., who designed some jerseys for the NBA G League, has been providing design workshops to young people in our after school enrichment program. And so they designed a t-shirt, and they were able to see the design process from beginning to the end. And we're going to sell those t-shirts to put back into the organization. And then also our youth action board, we kind of have an informal earned revenue stream set up with them, but they receive funds. So if they speak on a panel, they are paid to do that from the organization that asked them to speak. Or if, they have any information or any projects that they're working on, there is compensation for those efforts. We really do believe that we need to value the time and expertise of our youth leaders, and so we pay them, and we partner again with organizations such as Public Allies and also local businesses to be able to place young people in employment opportunities that kind of leans into the earned revenue that we want to model within our organization.
Great, thank you so much. Just want to take a moment to recognize we're kind of coming up on the end of our time here, but we did have another question in the chat that I'd like to pose to our panelists, and then we'll, begin the process of wrapping this panel up. But the question is from Alexis Hines. Alexis, I'm not sure if you'd like to ask the question yourself or if you'd like me to just read it out for you. Okay, I'm going to take that as okay, sounds good. I will read it out for you, and I will drop this in the chat because it's a little bit of a lengthy question. So the two questions that were posed by Alexis are surrounding local funding support as well as organizational autonomy. So the first question is, what would you recommend for small nonprofit businesses who are interested in recruiting financial support from communities and homeowners, in addition to those sources mentioned today? And the second question is, do more established nonprofits advise new nonprofits to encourage further functional differentiation and autonomy in organizational mission? So I know those are two kind of different questions, but I'll invite the panelists to kind of hop in and answer one or both, or whatever you guys would like.
I can jump in first. So I guess the first question, I would again point to a resource. Through our Collab program, we offer, again, these are free 45-minute consultations with focused on particular subject topics. And one of those is fund development. So I think what the question being posed here is around sort of individual campaigning and fundraising and raising funds from individuals. And so I'd point to that as a resource. I myself am not a fund development expert, though there certainly are a lot of really great fundraising resources out there. And then I would also just ask the person who asked the question to clarify between small business and nonprofit, because I think raising funds for those two structures looks different. The second question around established nonprofits advising new nonprofits, to me is nuanced. I would say that it depends. I think assuming that established nonprofits have the answers, or are in some sort of position of power by advising new nonprofits is making a lot of assumptions. I think, as Courtney lifted up earlier, there are some sectors and some dynamics where historically, perhaps leadership has not represented the communities that are being served. And so I would just sort of name that both established nonprofits and new nonprofits have a lot that they can learn from each other. Years of operating experience, sure, is valuable, so is lived experience. And oftentimes we see grassroots organizations that have been operating informally, but doing work in their communities for years. And so their experience and thoughts that they're bringing to the table can be just as valuable. And there's a lot that organizations can learn from each other. If the question is whether this is happening, I think the answer is yes. And again, it depends on the organization, on the sector, on the community that's being served. But we do try to support, again, organizations learning from each other and honoring both of each other's expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyla. Any of our other panelists want to jump in? Okay, sounds good. Well, I do think we have time for one last question for our panelists. And, in the spirit of positive, collaborations that come from nonprofits, could each of you sort of briefly give us, an example or a personal experience with the best outcome that came out of a nonprofit to nonprofit collaboration for your specific organization?
I'll start. This is Courtney with the Detroit Phoenix Center. So a really great partnership that came out from our organization is we partner with the Homeless Action Network of Detroit, which is a large entity that really houses and distributes the government funds that comes down from HUD. And so in order for our community to have applied, just really short and brief, in order for our community to have applied for a very large grant of $5.6 million, we were one of 33 communities, Detroit was, to receive the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program grant. The community had to have a working, functioning, real live youth action board that has been in existence for years. So Detroit Phoenix Center, we've been at the table of this working group since our existence. So our youth action board became the official youth action board for the city of Detroit, where they are paid $75 essentially an hour for the work that they do for the grant. And they've been very instrumental in creating a coordinated community plan to prevent, end, and address youth homelessness. But what's key to know about this partnership is that without it, our community would not have received that $5.6 million that contributes to a greater level of change that extends well beyond our own organizational capacity.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That's amazing. I see that you unmuted Kelly. You can jump in there.
Yeah, I think our most successful collaborations have been around hosting our conferences. So again, those are hosted at various higher ed institutions across the country. And so when that happens, there's a local group at the university that is collaborating with our institution. They're the host organization. They provide both financial support as well as human resource support to make that happen. And then we work collaboratively on creating the conference programming and work in that way. So that's probably been our most successful collaboration to date.
I'll share one example between nonprofit and for-profit. So with the formation of the Good Institute and the programs, we have two programs that both utilize our media company. So in the for-profit, Good Worldwide, where I sit in my normal day job, we have a media company called Upworthy, and we reach about 100 million people a month. And some of the organizations in the nonprofit sector have a real challenge in breaking through and getting their message to a larger audience, whether that be as purposes of awareness or fundraising or providing examples for other organizations to follow. And so the executive director of Net Impact, the CEO, Peter Lupoff, talks about now that we're in direct partnership with Net Impact as an example, they had around 65,000 social followers in the organization previously, which is a pretty healthy number. But he calls that a pea shooter compared to the howitzer that we have with Upworthy, where we have 16 million social followers and multiple channels to reach people. So when you can create mechanisms to give a much bigger voice to organizations that, hiring a communications person or a marketing person is usually not priority hire number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a ways down the list and sometimes never gets hired for. And so the ability to sort of tap into another organization's strength in this instance is, and we've had multiple instances of helping give voice to individuals and organizations that are part of the Net Impact community, and expect to be doing that more and more, one of them being student voices, to help them get a much larger platform to have their voice heard, because that's sometimes one of the bigger challenges nonprofit organizations have if they've got an aspiration or an operational need to reach a larger audience.
Amazing. Kyla, you want to round us out?
Sure. So maybe just building upon that example, I think where we've seen a lot of success in our collaborations is through reaching more organizations. So for our grant programs, we partner with Michigan Community Resources to provide one-on-one application assistance, which again is particularly helpful for smaller grassroots organizations who might not have a grant writer on staff, and just in general for leaders to come in and learn a little bit more about the program and have a thought partner to think through ideas. And then we also partnered with what we call network hubs. And so these are place-based organizations located throughout the sort of eligible areas that are where the grants are available to. So for our Activate Fund, this looked like one in every county in Southeast Michigan. For our current program, KIPD Plus, it's across the city of Detroit Council districts in Highland Park and Hamtramck. And the result of that has been that we saw over 260 applications for both programs. And for the KIPD Plus program that's been operating for years, this completely shattered all prior years' applications. And so especially with the application assistance as well, they're not just applications, but they're really competitive. So we're seeing our programs being more accessible to smaller grassroots organizations and being able to have a wider reach by partnering with other organizations to let folks know about the opportunity.
Everyone, thank you so much. Hirsch, I apologize for interrupting before. I want to conclude this by just first and foremost saying, Haley, Hershey, thank you for creating the space. This was invaluable. And to our star-studded panelists, we could not be more grateful for your insights. And we just really appreciate that you took time out of your really busy schedule to come here. I'm certainly leaving this conversation more inspired. If everyone could unmute themselves, use a reaction, or dare I say, turn on their cameras, only if y'all are comfortable, and just applaud these incredible panelists. I know we're not in person, but just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. We'll go ahead and wrap this up, but this was lovely, and thanks for sharing your Friday mornings with us. Bye, everyone.
So much, everyone.